Janak asks Ashtavakra, if God is compassionate, why does sorrow exist? Ashtavakra says, sorrow exists because the mind believes it has been wounded by life. That which is whole cannot be wounded. Only that which imagines itself separate feels pain. Suffering arises where division is believed. Where unity is seen, sorrow has no soil to grow. The mind creates two: God and world, self and other, desire and denial. From this fracture, suffering is born. Sorrow exists because the mind believes God is outside. Where God is believed to be elsewhere, existence feels abandoned. Where existence feels abandoned, fear appears. Where fear appears, suffering follows like a faithful shadow. The mind suffers because it expects reality to behave. Reality has never made a promise. Expectation is the contract the mind signs with illusion. When illusion breaks the contract, the mind calls it suffering. Suffering exists because the mind believes in purpose. Purpose imagines a future. Future imagines fulfillment. Fulfillment imagines lack. Lack imagines pain. That which is complete does not seek a destination. The mind suffers because it believes in meaning. Meaning is applied after experience. Experience itself is silent. The wound is not in experience, the wound is in interpretation. Suffering exists because the mind believes something went wrong, but nothing has ever gone wrong. Only thought stumbles over its own expectation and calls the stumble tragedy. The mind suffers because it believes God created a story. But God created no narrative. Narrative is written by memory. Memory edits reality and calls the edit fate. Suffering exists because the mind believes in time. Time creates before and after. Before imagines loss. After imagines repair. Between them, the mind calls itself broken. Where there is no yesterday, there is no regret. Where there is no tomorrow, there is no hope. Hope and regret together create suffering and name it human life. The mind suffers because it believes God must explain. But explanation belongs to the mind, not to truth. Truth does not justify itself. Only illusion asks for reasons. Suffering exists because the mind believes in fairness. Fairness imagines comparison. Comparison imagines inequality. Inequality imagines injustice. Injustice imagines pain. The ocean does not accuse its waves. Fire does not judge its heat. The sky does not mourn its storms. Only the mind asks why existence does not obey it. The mind suffers because it believes God should protect. Protection imagines danger. Danger imagines threat. Threat imagines victim. Victim imagines suffering. But that which is real has never been threatened. Only the image of self feels unsafe. Suffering exists because the mind believes in identity. Identity is memory pretending to be truth. Memory remembers pleasure and pain and calls the contrast existence. Awareness witnesses both without preference. The witness does not suffer. Only the character does. The mind suffers because it believes God created rules. Rules imagine punishment. Punishment imagines guilt. Guilt imagines sorrow. But existence has never issued commandments. The tree does not suffer its fruit. The river does not suffer its bends. The sun does not suffer its setting. Only the mind resists what appears. Suffering exists because the mind believes it must become. Becoming imagines lack. Lack imagines improvement. Improvement imagines failure. Failure imagines pain. That which is whole does not become. It only is. The mind suffers because it believes God is testing. Testing imagines success. Success imagines failure. Failure imagines worth. Worth imagines judgment. But God does not examine existence. Existence is not a classroom. Only the mind grades itself and calls the score destiny. Suffering exists because the mind believes in ownership. Ownership imagines loss. Loss imagines fear. Fear imagines pain. Experience arises freely. Ownership is imagined afterward, like a fence built around the wind. The mind suffers because it believes God owes happiness. But happiness is a concept. Reality offers only presence. Presence is neutral. The mind calls neutrality suffering. Suffering exists because the mind seeks permanence. Permanence imagines death. Death imagines loss. Loss imagines sorrow. But that which is real has never been born and therefore cannot die. The mind suffers because it believes God made mistakes. Mistake imagines correction. Correction imagines flaw. Flaw imagines suffering. But existence has never erred. Only thought argues with what is. Suffering exists because the mind believes in personal story. Story requires hero. Hero requires enemy. Enemy requires conflict. Conflict requires pain. But awareness has no story. It only witnesses scenes appear and disappear. The mind suffers because it wants life to make sense. Sense is a mental demand. Reality does not explain itself. It simply unfolds. The wind does not justify its direction. The rain does not apologize for its fall. The earth does not defend its earthquakes. Only the mind demands reasons. Suffering exists because the mind believes God created a world. But God did not create objects. God appears as objects. The wave is not separate from the ocean. The form is not separate from the formless. Where separation is believed, suffering arises. Where unity is seen, suffering dissolves. The mind suffers because it believes God is watching. Watching imagines judgment. Judgment imagines guilt. Guilt imagines sorrow. But awareness does not watch. It is the seeing itself. Suffering exists because the mind believes it must survive. Survival imagines threat. Threat imagines danger. Danger imagines fear. Fear imagines pain. But that which you are has never been endangered. Only the image trembles. The mind suffers because it seeks meaning in pain. Meaning preserves the sufferer. Without meaning, suffering collapses. Suffering exists because the mind believes God has a plan. Plan imagines destination. Destination imagines delay. Delay imagines frustration. Frustration imagines sorrow. But reality has no destination. It is already complete. The mind suffers because it believes God should remove suffering. But God did not add suffering. The mind added interpretation. Pain is sensation. Suffering is resistance to sensation. Remove resistance and suffering vanishes. Sensation remains. The mind suffers because it believes suffering is real. Reality does not suffer. Only thought suffers. The sage does not eliminate suffering. He sees it. Seeing is enough. That which is seen loses authority. When suffering is seen, it dissolves without effort. No practice is required. No belief is needed. No God must intervene. The mind suffers because it believes it is the doer. Doer imagines responsibility. Responsibility imagines blame. Blame imagines sorrow. Action appears. The actor is imagined afterward. Suffering is the echo of this imagination. The mind suffers because it believes it fell. That which never stood cannot fall. The mind suffers because it believes it was damaged. That which is real has never been touched. Suffering exists because the mind wants redemption. Redemption imagines sin. Sin imagines guilt. Guilt imagines pain. But existence has committed nothing. No crime has occurred. No forgiveness is required. The mind suffers because it fears silence. Silence dissolves identity. Identity survives through suffering. Without suffering, the mind disappears. That is why it clings to sorrow as its final proof of existence. The mind suffers because it wants to remain central. Suffering keeps the self at the center of the universe. Without suffering, the self dissolves into awareness. The sage does not promise happiness. He invites you to look. Look and see that suffering appears and disappears. Look and see that you remain. Look and see that nothing has touched you. You have never been broken. You have never been punished. You have never been abandoned by God. Suffering belongs to thought. You are prior to thought. The mind rises and falls like a wave. The ocean does not suffer its movement. When this is seen, the mind becomes quiet, not by force, not by faith, but by understanding its own unreality. What remains does not ask why. What remains does not seek meaning. What remains does not accuse God. What remains was never wounded. What remains was never lacking. What remains was never separate. Here, sorrow cannot enter. Here, suffering has no address. Here, God is not compassionate because nothing needs compassion. Here, nothing is fixed because nothing is broken. Here, nothing is forgiven because nothing is guilty. Here, the question dissolves before the answer completes itself. Here, Janak is silent. Here, Ashtavakra has not spoken. Here, only what is remains unmoved.